Hi, I'm Stephanie Becker, and I am going to be presenting my Module 12 case study, The Budget Debacle. To start off with, we're going to summarize the case study itself. We're going to start by identifying who key players were within the case study. The case study is about Briardale Elementary School. It is a school within a district that houses 600 students, kindergarten through fifth grade. It is one of 6 elementary schools within the district. It has a large veteran teacher population, so it seems to be that staff are happy with where they're at. There's not a lot of transfers or people leaving. The district itself focuses on basic skills, and educational objectives for each school is based upon that school's student needs. It also um, adds to its skill set by adding in supplementary programs such as art and music and physical educations, but those are funded by funds that are raised by an appointed foundation for that specific school. Another key player within this case study is Carl Santos, who is the school principal. He believes that he has a firm understanding of the budget and uses an established protocol within the community of stakeholders, um, which he has a school site curriculum committee that helps guide decisions. He is also the person who was in charge of providing orientation for the new foundation president, who is Mr. Barley, who we'll talk about in just a little bit, but was able to explain the roles that he would need to follow as well as his responsibilities. Mr. Barley is new to the community, and he was appointed the new foundation president for Briardale Elementary School. He is motivated to raise the biggest funds. A lot of the reason why is because he has an old rivalry from a fraternity brother at Harvard who is on another foundation's board within a different school but in the same district. So Mr. Braley has proposed selling raffle tickets in exchange to win a cash prize because it's something that he'd had experience with as he was a student at Harvard. To continue our summary, we're just going to look at what has currently happened. The Briardale School District uses fundraising to raise money for supplemental school programs to ensure their future success and well-being of students as well as adults within their school through their Briardale Foundation. In an effort to raise additional funding to support Briardale supplemental programs, Mr. Burley, the new president of the foundation, has proposed that they create a raffle ticket fundraiser because of his previous success with one in college. Mr. Burley, as I mentioned before, is motivated to raise more funds than his former fraternity brother at another school and has established a strategy for selling tickets and presents that strategy to the foundation, and the members of the foundation are in support of the fundraising idea. So tickets were sold, and the raffle was to take place at Briardale Elementary amongst school and community members. When the night of the fundraiser, the sheriff was tipped off by someone within the community and arrived at the raffle to accompany Mr. Barley to the sheriff's office where he was booked and released. He was later charged with a misdemeanor and placed on probation. This news unfortunately made the front page of the local newspaper, leaving Mr. Santos feeling embarrassed and tarnishing the foundation's reputation. Section 2 is we are going to look at some of what could possibly be legal as well as ethical issues. So to talk about legal issues first, obviously Mr. Burley was charged with a misdemeanor. That's definitely a big issue as far as legalities go. In some states, raffles may be considered illegal. That was something that I researched and looked up, and I just wanted to also figure out, since thinking of my future job as an administrator, it's important for me to know and understand the responsibilities that I will have. So within the state of Kansas, when I looked it up, schools are recognized as a nonprofit organization and meet the requirements to conduct a raffle as long as they follow specific guidelines. And that was from the Kansas Department of Revenue in 2022. As far as ethical issues, there are a couple different ones that I identified within this case study. I felt like there were harmful consequences from the fundraising debacle. Mr. Barley was given a harsh consequence for the handling of the raffle. While he was not physically harmed, it surely harmed him personally and possibly professionally as well. He also now has a permanent mark on his record. This incident will also be detrimental to the school and its foundation. I feel like as we are developing a community of stakeholders, that it's important that we have a trust built with them and they feel like we are open and honest communicating with them. And I feel like this is something that could prove the school to be untrustworthy and make them more hesitant to support the school. This ultimately affects the future success and well-being of both students and adults, as the district relies on this funding in order to support those supplemental programs. So unfortunately, what will end up or could end up happening is not having enough money to support those programs. Thus, Briardale students won't have an equal opportunity to participate in the same programs that other schools within the district can. Finally, Mr. Santos's reputation has also been harmed because as a leader, it's his responsibility to communicate and apply laws and policies within his school. And after this incident, he may feel like he's no longer capable of leading the school, and other people may feel like he's not capable of leading the school. And again, as a leader, it's our job to be able to establish a trustworthy system in order to support those students that we are teaching, as well as the staff that we are leading. So to synthesize what has happened within this situation, in an effort to fund supplemental programs at Briardale Elementary, the foundation and principal unknowingly approved an illegal fundraising raffle, leading to the termination of the fundraiser and legal action against Mr. Barley. To synthesize the facts that we do know, people involved would be the school district itself, Principal Santos, Mr. Barley, Mr. Morley, who is the fraternity brother that was head of another school's foundations, the Briardale students, the Briardale Foundation, community stakeholders, and local sheriff. Places where this has happened, Briardale Elementary School, which has been located in the center of the town. It has served as the town's community meeting center within a very diverse community. It sounds like it was kind of a common place for the community. And so again, when we're looking about the reputation of Briardale, it might have really affected it being used as a meeting point within the district. Other places that we know where events took place would be the sheriff's department and, of course, within the town itself. Programs, we know that this is a public education and that it currently has 6 elementary buildings, 2 middle schools, and a high school, that it has a curriculum focused on basic skills and is able to have supplemental programs based on the funding that it receives. So to synthesize unknown facts and questions that came about when thinking about the information that was provided versus information that I still feel like is important to know and understand in this situation. As far as people who are involved, it made me question if the Principal Santos being involved, did he follow district policies? Did Mr. Morley blow the whistle on Briardale? Is that where the whole sheriff getting involved came about? And if so, as part of a district, we should be working together and not against each other. Did students sell the tickets, or how were they acquired? How many community members are a part of the foundation? And how has Mr. Barley been affected by the debacle? So those are just some things as far as with people being involved, how have they been affected, and what more could we know about that situation? Places, Briardale Elementary, it said that the town was diverse, but it really didn't give us an idea of how diverse the population was within the school. What are the socioeconomic statuses of students within the school? I also questioned what the school boundaries are, or how they go about drawing those up to know what students attend which schools. And then just how many faculty and staff are there as well to understand how this affects the teachers working within those buildings. The town, an unknown fact again, was we don't really know the population of the town, as well as if it's a more of a rural or urban setting, and again, the demographics of the population that make up the town. And then programs, some unknown information that I feel like we needed to know more about is, does each building house their own special education and title programs? Because we know that this also affects funding to schools. And so I was just wondering if they had one school that housed those programs or if each school was responsible for their own. And then I also just wondered if there was a large discrepancy between schools on the amount of money that was raised by foundations. We know that towns and the shifting of populations within the town and places. I've worked in a bigger setting where some schools within that district were known as our title schools and the lower income schools based on where they were located within that town. And so that definitely affects the population of students that are attending, as well as the funding being given to those schools. Section 5 is to go ahead and review. And so when I look at reviewing, I was thinking about the types of damage control. Number one, to think about within this story. So Bridal has been a staple in the community as a town meeting center that's hosted multiple events and larger events. It said some events, like a spelling bee of over 1,000 people would be attending. This may cause them to lose that position of being a staple within the community. I also wonder about community members and stakeholders continuing to support the school. Because of the legal situation, it could be really damaging to their future fundraising. Currently, the situation is both damaging to the school district, the stakeholders, and the community because an appointed leader of their foundation has been charged with a misdemeanor in relation to a school activity, thus giving all a negative reputation that was unfortunately highlighted in their local newspaper. And we know that not all sides of a story are always heard within the news. And so some people could just see that and come up with their own opinions without really understanding that it was more an incident of negligence versus someone trying to commit an illegal activity. Have relevant stakeholders been consulted? From what I could tell, no. The school board itself, the fundraising idea was not presented to the board, nor did they seek the board's permission before they implemented the fundraiser. The superintendent was not consulted about the upcoming fundraising event. The teachers, it really didn't talk about that, as well as the student input or community members. The foundation itself had limited members, it sounded like, as being a part of it. And I just really question if we had an accurate amount of people contributing and giving their ideas that represented the diverse community as a whole. Continue with reviewing and then prioritizing. So things that I feel like we can learn more about and what would be prioritized for me would be definitely understanding those state and district fundraising laws to improve my management as a principal, my communication, technology, school level governance, and operation systems to develop and improve data informed, as well as equitable school resource plans to apply laws, policies, and regulations. Again, as an administrator and as taking on that role of Mr. Santos, it is my job to be able to evaluate and develop guidelines, school level guidelines, and make sure that my staff understand those and that we're following those guidelines and that I'm not leading them astray. I also feel that I would seek district legal counsel to acquire more information, again, so that I made sure that I wasn't missing something. And I would identify the number of foundation members as well as their positions, because I think we need to have a better representation of diversity among the community and promote collaboration between those stakeholders within the community. And finally, I think it's important to examine the differences in money raised between all foundations. I know that as a principal, This is not my sole job, and it may even be above me, but it's something that I think just as a whole within a district that we need to look at what is best for our students and what is best for our staff. And so that means to me looking at each elementary school. And if there's a discrepancy and a large discrepancy between the fundraising between schools, I think that that is something that needs to be looked at to maintain equality between those schools, because ultimately we need to make sure we are supporting our students as well as our teachers and allocation of those resources. So if I were to identify some options and some consequences, the first one we talked about, or it listed within our rubric, was what would happen if no action was taken. And Briardale does not receive foundation funding for supplemental programs. Another option could be that we follow the district guidelines to issue a public apology for the fundraising incident and refund that money to rebuild trust among community and stakeholders. A third option I looked at was evaluating the current district fundraising procedures, gathering input from district legal counsel, and develop new guidelines approved by the superintendent and school board. We could also redefine membership at the foundation to include an administrator, a parent or parents, teachers, as well as community members. Again, looking at how can we involve all stakeholders. And then finally, another one I looked at was combining foundations to better advocate and develop an equitable resourcing plan amongst all schools in the district to support school improvement and student development. So evaluating those options, there's lots of pros and cons for each one. So not taking an action after the fundraiser has been stopped. I didn't really feel like there was a lot of pros there. I thought maybe the only one I could see is it could possibly go overlooked and people won't pay attention and not realize that that legal action had taken place. Cons that I see are there's not going to be any funding for supplemental programs for Briardale, tarnished reputation for the district as well as the foundation, and then just that leadership being questionable now and not having the trust of your community members. Number 2, following the district guidelines to issue a public apology for the fundraising incident and refund the money. Pros of that, I really feel like it rebuilds the trust with stakeholders and community members. I feel that having district guidelines and following those would ensure that that apology is written in good taste. We don't want an apology to come off and make more problems by issuing that apology. Cons, again, some stakeholders and members of the community may still feel that there's a lack of leadership in the district, that tarnished reputation, and then just also we're admitting negligence on part of the district, and so that can be a con as well. Pros of evaluating the current district fundraising procedures and gathering input from legal counsel and guidelines. I feel like this ensures that future fundraising follows state and legal guidelines. The guidelines can be shared with the community to acknowledge that we have fixed the previous problem, and it's not going to happen again. Cons, definitely this is going to take more time to, number 1, seek legal advice, and 2, gather together new stakeholders to create those new guidelines. We're going to have to wait for a board meeting or have a special board meeting in order to seek that approval. So time is not on our side during that. However, I do feel that it is definitely a step that we need to take. Number 4, redefining the membership of the foundation to include administrators, parents, teachers, and community members. Pros of this ensures all stakeholders have a voice. And we know that if we need support within our schools, we have to make sure that we are listening to every stakeholder that's involved. We have a greater representation of the diversity within our community when we do this. And quite possibly we might have an increase in donations because people may have more buy-in if they know that they have a voice and can contribute to that. Cons, of course, the more people that are involved, the harder it may be to reach decisions and find a common time to be able to meet to have those meetings. Finally, my last option was combining foundations to better advocate and develop an equitable resourcing plan amongst all schools in the district to support school improvement and student development. The pros of this, equitable resources would be given to all schools. And I think a district should all be headed in the same direction. I don't feel like our schools should be working against one another. And I feel like within this situation, that's what's happening. I also feel like this is going to increase student achievement because all students are having the same opportunities. When they get to middle school and high school, they're going to be coming together and being together as one population. So again, we want to make sure that prior to that, everybody has the same opportunity. And then another pro is just collaboration between schools instead of competition. Cons of this, some contributors may not contribute as much knowing that it's not just going to their child's school. There could be some difficulty collaborating with one another because of different viewpoints. And again, this is going to take more than just me as a principal to pursue. So it's going to be a multi-step problem that is going to have to take multiple people involved, as well as superintendent and the board, to be able to weigh in on this decision. So it's not one that I feel like I can input and do on my own. So with those pros and cons and thinking through those, my best option would be multiple options that I identified. So I believe that we need to follow the district guidelines to issue a public apology. I feel that we need to evaluate our current district fundraising procedures, gather input from legal counsel, and develop new guidelines that it's approved by the superintendent and school board. We know for the state of Kansas, all fundraising activities for activity funds should be approved in advance by the superintendent or designee, and that's from the Kansas State Department of 2022. And then I also feel like we definitely need to redefine membership of the foundation to include an administrator, parents, teachers, community members. This ensures all stakeholders are involved, valued, and allows for me as an administrator to advocate and develop an equitable resourcing plan to support school improvement and student development. So if I were going to implement my decision, I believe that I would kind of follow these first few steps. The first step I feel like we would need to take is constructing that public apology. And I would do that together with our superintendent and our human resources representative. I know within my current district, we are not supposed to talk to news or media without having a prior release from our superintendent and input from them. I also would have our district treasurer and work with them that we could that we would issue refunds based on records that were kept of the tickets sold, so that again we are showing good faith in returning that money to the patrons. My second step would be to seek district legal counsel and look at rewriting guidelines to follow for stronger school level governance in my school's fundraising to avoid another situation like this happening again. I do feel like that's not only my job at my own school, but again, this is where I would start so that we have those in order, because we know all fundraising is going to need to be approved by the superintendent and board of education. And I feel like that is something that needs to happen quickly so that we hopefully can dissolve the current foundation that we have going and invite all stakeholders within the school and community to be a part of the new foundation. This is going to help to improve my management as a principal and communication amongst the stakeholders, as well as it's going to help me advocate for those equitable resources to support school improvement and student development. Hopefully that new foundation will work together to quickly get a new fundraiser in place that follows our newly established guidelines and meets the superintendent and board approval, because ultimately we know that we want to promote the current and future success of students and adults. I am sure within this decision, it's going to take a lot of time, and it might not be something that happens within that school year. So if that is the case, and we can't get new guidelines written within that time frame, I would propose that we go ahead with a new foundation, and then whatever that foundation comes together and decides as a priority for a new fundraiser, that we would then seek the superintendent and board approval before we present that to our community. Because again, I feel like that is something that definitely needs to happen in order for my students, as well as my staff, to have an equitable resourcing plan that is equal to the other districts, or excuse me, the other schools within the district. Otherwise, I feel like I'm not doing my part as an administrator to advocate for my students. This class, as well as this case study, really allow me to think deeper about making sure that as an administrator, I understand the laws and that I'm able to evaluate and then communicate those to my staff is important to me, because I'm not only responsible for my reputation as an administrator, but I'm responsible for our school's reputation, our district's reputation, as well as the future well-being of the staff that I am serving. So I feel like my staff need to be able to trust me, and I should be able to lead them in the correct direction, be knowledgeable about what I am communicating with them, as well as develop a relationship built on trust for both my staff, my students, as well as my stakeholders. That concludes my case study. And these are the two references that I used within my case study reflection of making decisions. Thanks for listening.